The boy was chained to the porch post like a dog. Not metaphorically, actually chained. A rusted iron collar circled his thin neck, bolted to a short length of chain that rattled when he moved. His wrists were raw where rope had been tied too tight for too long. He sat with his knees pulled up, head down, dark hair falling across his face. He wore no shoes. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, stained with dust and something darker. He didn't look up when the wagon rolled in. Caleb Thorne pulled the reins and led his mare slow to a halt in the yard. The house before him was crooked, leaning slightly to the left like a man too drunk to stand straight. The barn behind it sagged. The fence posts were rotted. Chickens scattered across the dirt, pecking at nothing. And on the porch, that boy, maybe 10 years old, maybe 12, hard to tell with the way his ribs showed through the fabric. Caleb didn't move. He sat on the wagon seat, hands still holding the reins, and stared. The boy's lips moved. Caleb couldn't hear the words, but he saw them form. "Don't look here." Not a plea for help, a plea for dignity. The door of the house banged open. A man stepped out, wide-shouldered and red-faced, suspenders hanging loose over a stained undershirt. He had a shotgun resting against his shoulder, casual as a walking stick. "You Thorne," the man called. Caleb nodded slowly. "I am." "Heard you were buying." The man spat into the dirt. "Got what you're looking for." Caleb climbed down from the wagon. His boots hit the ground with a dull thud. He was a tall man, lean and weathered, with gray creeping into his beard. His hat was wide-brimmed and worn. He moved like someone who'd learned long ago not to waste motion. "I'm looking for labor," Caleb said carefully. "Someone who can work a ranch, mend fence, tend cattle." The man grinned. "This one can work. Been working since he could walk, strong back, don't complain much." He gestured toward the boy with the barrel of the shotgun. "Quiet too, won't give you no trouble." Caleb's jaw tightened. He looked at the boy again. The boy's eyes were fixed on the ground. His hands were trembling. "How long's he been like that?" Caleb asked. "Like what?" "Chained." The man shrugged. "Weak maybe, tried to run off. Can't have that, boy needs to learn." He stepped closer, boots heavy on the porch boards. "You want him or not? I got another buyer coming tomorrow, won't wait long." Caleb's stomach turned. He'd come out here because word had reached him that a family was selling off help after a bad season. He'd expected to find a hired hand looking for steadier work. Not this. Not a child in chains. "What's his name?" Caleb asked. "Don't matter. You buy him, you call him whatever you want." "It matters to me." The man scratched his jaw, irritated. "Jesse, his name's Jesse." Caleb stepped closer to the porch. The boy, Jesse, flinched but didn't raise his head. "Jesse," Caleb said quietly, "look at me." The boy didn't move. "Jesse." Slowly, painfully, the boy lifted his chin. His face was gaunt. His eyes were dark, hollow, and filled with something Caleb recognized immediately. "Shame." Not fear, not anger, just deep, bone-crushing shame. Caleb's throat tightened. He'd seen that look before, years ago, on another face, in another place. "How much?" Caleb said flatly. The man's grin widened. $50, cash. "That's robbery. That's the price." Caleb reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He counted the bills slowly, deliberately, and handed them over. The man snatched them up, flipped through them once, and nodded. "Pleasure doing business," the man said. He pulled a key from his pocket and tossed it onto the porch near the boy's feet. "Unlock him yourself. I'm done with him." He turned and walked back into the house. The door slammed shut. Caleb stood there for a long moment, staring at the key lying in the dust. Then he bent down, picked it up, and walked slowly toward the porch. Jesse's breathing quickened, his whole body tensed. He didn't look up. Caleb knelt in front of him. "I'm going to unlock this," he said quietly. "I'm not going to hurt you." Jesse said nothing. Caleb reached forward and fit the key into the lock on the collar. The iron was cold and heavy. It clicked open. Caleb pulled it away carefully, setting it aside. The skin beneath was raw, red, already forming scabs. Jesse's hand went to his throat instinctively, fingers brushing the open air where the collar had been. "Can you stand?" Caleb asked. Jesse nodded. He pushed himself up on shaking legs. He was taller than Caleb expected, but rail-thin. His feet were bare and filthy. Caleb took off his coat and draped it over the boy's shoulders. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you out of here." Jesse followed him to the wagon without a word. He climbed up onto the seat and sat stiffly, hands folded in his lap. He stared straight ahead. Caleb took the reins and clicked his tongue. The mare started forward. They rode. In silence. The sun was sinking behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The air was cooling. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Caleb glanced sideways at the boy. Jesse's face was unreadable. His eyes were fixed on the horizon. "You got family?" Caleb asked. Jesse shook his head. "Anyone looking for you?" Another shake. "Where'd you come from?" Jesse's jaw tightened. "Doesn't matter." Caleb let it go. He didn't push. He'd learned long ago that some stories came out slow if they came out at all. They rode for another mile before Jesse spoke again. "Why'd you do it?" he asked quietly. Caleb frowned. "Do what?" "By me." Caleb didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the road. "Because I saw you," he said finally, "and I couldn't leave you there." Jesse turned his head slightly, looking at Caleb for the first time. "What are you going to do with me?" "Nothing," Caleb said. "You'll work if you want to, eat if you're hungry, sleep in a bed, that's it." Jesse's brow furrowed. "That's not how this works." "Maybe not," Caleb said, "but it's how it's going to work on my ranch." Jesse looked away again. His hands tightened around the edge of the wagon's seat. "I don't believe you," he whispered. Caleb nodded slowly. "I know." They reached the ranch just as the last light faded from the sky. It was a modest place, clean, sturdy, well-kept. A barn, a small house, a corral with a few horses. Smoke rose from the chimney. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down. Jesse hesitated, then followed. "Come on inside," Caleb said. "I'll get you some food." Jesse stood in the yard, arms wrapped around himself beneath the coat. "You said I'd work." "You will tomorrow. Tonight you eat and rest." Jesse's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Caleb turned to face him fully. "Because some things are worth more than work, and one of them is making sure a boy doesn't go to bed hungry." Jesse stared at him, then slowly he nodded. Caleb led him inside. The house was warm. A fire crackled in the stone hearth. The smell of coffee and something cooking filled the air. It was small but comfortable, wooden floors, a sturdy table, shelves lined with books. "Books?" Jesse stopped in the doorway, staring. Caleb noticed. "You read?" he asked. Jesse shook his head quickly. "No." "You want to?" Jesse didn't answer. He just stood there, eyes fixed on the spines lined up along the wall. Caleb ladled stew into a bowl and set it on the table. "Sit." Jesse moved slowly, like he expected the chair to disappear beneath him. He sat down, hands in his lap. "Eat," Caleb said. Jesse picked up the spoon. His hand shook. He took a bite, then another, then ate like he'd forgotten what food tasted like. Caleb poured himself coffee and sat across from him, saying nothing. When Jesse finished, he set the spoon down carefully. "Thank you," he said quietly. Caleb nodded. "There's more if you want it." Jesse shook his head. Caleb leaned back in his chair, studying the boy. There was something familiar about him, not his face exactly, but the way he held himself, the way he flinched at sudden movements, the way he refused to meet anyone's eyes. "How long were you with that man?" Caleb asked. Jesse's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. 6 months. "Where were you before that?" Jesse's jaw clenched. "A farm south of here." "Your families?" "No," Jesse's voice was flat. "They died." Caleb's chest tightened. How? Jesse didn't answer. He stared down at the empty bowl. Caleb waited. Finally, Jesse spoke. Fire, 4 years ago. The barn went up first, then the house. My pa tried to get my sister out. He didn't make it. Caleb's breath caught. Fire, he repeated slowly. Jesse nodded. Someone set it, I don't know who, but it wasn't an accident. Caleb's hands went cold. He knew. God help him, he knew. What was your last name? Caleb asked quietly. Jesse looked up. Why? Just tell me. Jesse hesitated. Pharaoh. Caleb's world tilted. Pharaoh. Thomas Pharaoh, a farmer with a wife, 2 kids, and a piece of land just north of the county line. Caleb had known him, not well, but enough to nod to at the general store, enough to know he was a good man. And Caleb had been there the night he died. Not at the fire, but before it. 4 years ago, Caleb had been riding with a crew, not outlaws exactly, just men trying to survive in the chaos after the war. They'd been hired by a landowner named Garrett to clear out squatters who wouldn't sell. Caleb hadn't known what that meant, not until it was too late. He'd watched Garrett's men ride toward the Pharaoh farm at dusk. He'd seen the torches. He'd heard the orders. And he'd done nothing. He'd told himself it wasn't his fight, that he was just there to get paid, that if he spoke up, Garrett would turn on him too. So he'd ridden away. And the next morning, he'd heard that Thomas Pharaoh and his daughter had burned alive. Caleb looked at Jesse now, really looked at him, and saw the boy he'd failed to save 4 years ago. Jesse, Caleb said hoarsely, what did your pa look like? Jesse frowned. Why? Just tell me. Tall, dark hair, scar on his left hand from a plow accident. Caleb closed his eyes. It was him. You knew him, Jesse said suddenly. His voice was sharp. Didn't you? Caleb opened his eyes. Yes. Jesse stood up fast, knocking the chair back. You were there. It wasn't a question. Caleb didn't move. I was. You watched them die. I didn't. Caleb stopped. He couldn't finish the sentence, because it was true. He hadn't lit the fire, but he'd known it was coming, and he'd done nothing. Jesse's face twisted. You let them burn. I didn't know what they were going to do, Caleb said. His voice was rough. I didn't know. You knew enough, Jesse spat. You could have warned us, you could have stopped them, but you didn't. Caleb stood slowly. You're right. Jesse froze. I was there, Caleb continued. I rode with those men. I knew they were going to hurt your family, and I did nothing. His voice cracked. I've carried that for 4 years. Every damn day, I see your father's face, I hear the screams, and I know I could have stopped it. Jesse's chest heaved. Then why didn't you? Because I was a coward, Caleb said simply. Because I thought survival mattered more than doing what was right, and I've been trying to live with that ever since. Jesse stared at him, tears streaked down his face. You think buying me makes up for it? No, Caleb said. It doesn't, nothing does. But when I saw you on that porch, chained like an animal, I knew I couldn't walk away again. Jesse's fists clenched. I should hate you. You should, Caleb agreed. Jesse's breath came in ragged gasps. Why'd you tell me? You could have just kept quiet. I didn't remember you. Because you deserved the truth, Caleb said, and because I'm done lying to myself. Jesse wiped his face with the back of his hand. What happens now? That's up to you, Caleb said. You can leave. I won't stop you, or you can stay. Either way, I'll make sure you're fed and safe. Jesse looked around the room, at the fire, the food, the books. Then he looked back at Caleb. I don't forgive you, he said. I know. Jesse nodded slowly, but I'll stay for now. Caleb let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. And Caleb knew this was only the beginning. 3 days passed in uneasy quiet. Jesse worked. Not because Caleb asked him to, but because he didn't seem to know how to stop. He mended fence rails, fed the horses, hauled water from the well. He moved like someone who expected punishment if he stood still too long. Caleb let him work. He didn't push conversation. He just made sure there was food on the table and a blanket by the fire at night. On the third evening, Jesse spoke. "You have a lot of books." Caleb looked up from the leather harness he was stitching. "I do." "Why?" Caleb shrugged. "I like stories." Jesse frowned. "Why?" "Because they help me remember what it means to be human." Jesse didn't say anything for a while. Then, "Can you read one?" Caleb set down the harness. "You want me to read to you?" Jesse's face flushed. "Forget it, it's stupid." "It's not stupid," Caleb said. He stood and walked to the shelf. He ran his fingers along the spines, then pulled down a worn copy of The Last of the Mohicans. "This one's good. You'll like it." Jesse sat down by the fire. Caleb settled into his chair and opened the book. He read for an hour. His voice was low and steady, filling the small room. Jesse listened without moving, eyes fixed on the flames. When Caleb finally closed the book, Jesse was asleep, curled up on the floor with the blanket pulled over his shoulders. Caleb sat there for a long time, just watching him breathe. The riders came at dawn. Caleb heard them before he saw them, hoofbeats, fast and deliberate. He set down his coffee and stepped onto the porch. 5 men, all armed, led by a man Caleb recognized immediately. Garrett, the landowner who'd ordered the fire, older now, grayer, but still carrying himself like a king surveying his territory. He wore a long coat and a wide hat. His horse was black and expensive. Caleb's stomach sank. Garrett reined in at the edge of the yard. His men fanned out behind him. "Thorn," Garrett said. His voice was smooth. "Been a while." "Not long enough," Caleb replied. Garrett smiled. "Heard you bought a boy off Harlan a few days back. That true?" Caleb didn't answer. "Harlan's been making noise," Garrett continued. "Says the boy's a runaway, says he stole money before he left. Harlan wants him back." "Harlan sold him to me," Caleb said. "I paid cash. The boy's mine now." "That's the problem," Garrett said. "Harlan claims the sale wasn't legal, says the boy's stolen property, which means you're harboring a thief." Caleb's jaw tightened. "That's a lie." "Maybe," Garrett said, "but it's a lie backed by tea." He gestured to one of the men behind him. "Deputy Hayes here says we got the right to search your property, and if we find the boy, we're taking him back." The deputy, a thin man with a badge pinned crookedly to his vest, nodded. "That's right." Caleb didn't move. "You're not searching my house." Garrett's smile faded. "You sure you want to make this difficult?" "I'm sure." Garrett sighed. "You always were stubborn, Thorn. Even when we rode together, you never could see the bigger picture." "I saw it just fine," Caleb said coldly. "I saw you burn innocent people alive for their land. I saw you turn good men into killers, and I saw myself let it happen." Garrett's eyes hardened. "That was business." "It was murder." "Careful, Thorn. You're standing on dangerous ground." "So are you." Behind Caleb, the door opened. Jesse stepped out onto the porch. He looked at the men, then at Caleb. "They here for me?" Jesse asked quietly. "Yes," Caleb said. Jesse nodded. "Then I'll go." "No," Caleb said firmly, "you won't." Jesse looked at him. "Why not? You said it yourself. You already failed me once. Why get yourself killed now?" Caleb met his eyes. "Because this time, I'm not walking away." Garrett laughed. "How noble, but you're outnumbered, Thorn, and you're not as fast as you used to be." Caleb stepped down off the porch. "Maybe not, but I'm fast enough." The yard went silent. Garrett's men shifted in their saddles. The deputy's hand drifted toward his gun. Garrett studied Caleb for a long moment, then he shook his head. "You're a fool." "Probably," Caleb agreed. Garrett turned his horse. "We'll be back with the sheriff and a warrant, and when we come, you won't have a choice." He spurred his horse and rode off. His men followed. Caleb stood there until the dust settled. Jesse came down off the porch. You shouldn't have done that. Probably not, Caleb said again. They'll come back. I know. Jesse's voice dropped. Why are you doing this? Caleb looked at him. Because I owe you more than silence, and because some things are worth standing for. Jesse's throat worked. He looked away. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe, Caleb said, but at least I'll die doing the right thing. Jesse didn't respond. He just stood there, arms wrapped around himself, staring at the road where the riders had disappeared. And Caleb knew the worst was still coming. That night, Caleb didn't read. He sat at the table, cleaning his rifle. The oil rag moved in slow, deliberate strokes across the barrel. Jesse sat across from him, watching. You think they'll really come back? Jesse asked. Yes, Caleb said. When? Tomorrow, maybe the day after. Jesse bit his lip. You could just give me up, I'd understand. Caleb stopped cleaning. He set the rifle down and looked at Jesse. Is that what you want? Jesse shook his head. No, but I don't want you to die for me either. Then we agree on something, Caleb said. He picked up the rifle again. I don't plan on dying. You can't fight all of them. I'm not planning to. Jesse frowned. Then what are you planning? Caleb smiled faintly. I'm planning to remind them that this county still has people who remember what justice looks like. Jesse didn't understand, but he didn't ask. So here's the question that changes everything. If you were Caleb, knowing you'd already failed this boy once, would you risk everything to protect him now? Or would you tell yourself, again, that survival matters more than redemption? Take a breath, think about that. And if you're still with me, tap subscribe so you don't miss how this turns out. The next morning, Jesse found Caleb standing by the fence, staring out at the hills. Can I ask you something? Jesse said. Go ahead. Why do you read so much? Caleb turned. I told you I like stories. But why? Caleb considered the question. Because stories remind me that people can change, that even when things are broken, they can be mended. He paused. And because after the war, I forgot how to feel anything but tired. Books helped me remember. Jesse nodded slowly. My pa used to tell me stories. At night, before bed, he'd make them up. About cowboys and outlaws and men who did the right thing even when it was hard. Caleb's throat tightened. He sounds like a good man. He was, Jesse said. His voice was thick. He deserved better than what he got. He did, Caleb agreed. Jesse looked down. I don't remember all the stories, but I remember one, about a man who did something terrible and spent the rest of his life trying to make up for it. My pa said the man never really forgave himself, but he kept trying, and that's what mattered. Caleb swallowed hard. Your pa was right. Jesse looked up. His eyes were red. You really think you can stop them? I don't know, Caleb said honestly, but I'm going to try. Jesse stepped closer. Then teach me. Teach you what? How to fight? Caleb shook his head. No. Why not? Because. You're a kid, you shouldn't have to fight. I'm not a kid, Jesse said fiercely. I've been working since I was 6. I've been beaten and sold and chained. Don't tell me I'm too young to fight. Caleb studied him, then he nodded slowly. All right, but not with guns, not yet. He walked into the barn and came back with 2 wooden staffs. He handed one to Jesse. First lesson, Caleb said, balance. They trained for 2 hours. Caleb showed him how to stand, how to move, how to block. Jesse was clumsy at first, but he learned fast. When they finished, Jesse was sweating and breathing hard, but he was smiling. It was the first time Caleb had seen him smile. That evening, Caleb read again. He opened the book and picked up where he'd left off. Jesse sat by the fire, listening. His eyes never left Caleb's face. When the chapter ended, Jesse spoke. Do you think people can really change? He asked. Caleb closed the book. Yes. How do you know? Because I've seen it, Caleb said, and because I'm trying. Jesse looked at the fire. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't expect you to. But I don't hate you anymore. Caleb's chest ached. That's enough. Jesse nodded. Can you keep reading? Caleb opened the book again. And for the first time in 4 years, the weight on his shoulders felt just a little bit lighter. They came at noon. Garrett rode in with 8 men this time. The deputy was there, along with a man wearing a sheriff's badge. They carried rifles and pistols. They meant business. Caleb stepped out onto the porch. Jesse stood beside him, gripping the wooden staff Caleb had given him. This is your last chance, Thorne, Garrett called. Hand over the boy and we'll leave peacefully. No, Caleb said. The sheriff, a broad man with a thick mustache, urged his horse forward. Mr. Thorne, I got a warrant here. You're interfering with the law. That's not law, Caleb said. That's corruption. The sheriff's face darkened. You calling me corrupt? I'm calling Garrett corrupt, Caleb said, and I'm calling you a fool for listening to him. Garrett's jaw tightened. Enough, take them. The men dismounted. And then another sound rose, hoofbeats, from the east. Everyone turned. A line of riders appeared over the hill, 12 of them. Ranchers Caleb knew, men he'd worked alongside for years. Old Bill Carver, who ran the cattle operation 3 miles south. Sam Hodge, a farmer with 6 kids. Even young Tom Wesley, barely 20, who just inherited his father's land. They rode in slowly, fanning out behind Caleb's house. Bill Carver pulled up beside the porch. He was an old man, white-haired and weathered, but his back was straight and his eyes were hard. Caleb, Bill said, you all right? For now, Caleb said. Bill looked at Garrett. Heard you were making trouble, Garrett. Thought we'd come see for ourselves. Garrett's face went pale. This doesn't concern you, Carver. It does when you're trying to steal a boy off a decent man's land, Bill said. His voice was calm but cold. We all remember what you did to the Pharaohs, and we're all tired of pretending we don't. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Now hold on. No, Sam Hodge cut in. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and strong. You hold on, we've let Garrett run this county long enough. Burning farms, threatening families, twisting the law to suit himself. It ends today. Garrett's men shifted nervously. They were outnumbered now, and they knew it. Garrett's face twisted. You think you can stop me? I own half this county. You don't own us, Bill said flatly, and you sure as hell don't own the law. He looked at the sheriff. You gonna do your job, or you gonna keep letting this snake use you? The sheriff hesitated, then he dismounted. He walked over to Garrett. I'm going to need you to come with me, Mr. Garrett, the sheriff said slowly. Got some questions about the Pharaoh fire and a few other incidents. Garrett's eyes blazed. You're making a mistake. No, the sheriff said. I'm fixing one. He took Garrett's reins. The other men didn't resist. They just sat on their horses, hands away from their guns. Bill Carver looked at Caleb. You good? Caleb nodded. We're good. All right then, Bill tipped his hat. Come by next week, we'll talk. The ranchers rode off slowly. The sheriff led Garrett and his men away. And just like that, it was over. Jesse stood on the porch, staring at the empty road. They came for you, he said quietly. They did, Caleb agreed. Why? Because they're tired of watching bad men get away with things, and because they knew I was trying to do the right thing. Jesse looked up at him. You think it's really over? For now, Caleb said. Garrett's done. The sheriff knows it, but there'll always be someone like him. That's just how the world works. Jesse nodded. Then what do we do? We keep going, Caleb said. We work the land. We take care of each other, and we don't let the bad days make us forget. The good ones. Jesse was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, will you read tonight? Caleb smiled. Yeah, I'll read. The days turned into weeks. Jesse stayed. He worked the ranch, learned to ride, and started reading on his own. Slowly, the hollow look in his eyes began to fade. He still didn't forgive Caleb, not fully, but he stopped flinching when Caleb walked into a room. He started asking questions. He laughed once when Caleb's hat blew off in the wind. It wasn't much, but it was something. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Jesse sat on the porch with a book in his lap. Caleb sat beside him, whittling a piece of wood. "Do you think my pa would have liked you?" Jesse asked. Caleb considered it. "I don't know, maybe, or maybe he would have seen right through me." Jesse smiled faintly. "He probably would have." "Yeah," Caleb said, "probably." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn gold and red. "Thank you," Jesse said quietly. Caleb looked at him. "For what?" "For not walking away." Caleb's throat tightened. "You're welcome." Jesse opened the book and started reading aloud. His voice was soft but steady. And Caleb listened, eyes on the horizon, knowing that some debts could never be fully repaid, but that didn't mean you stopped trying. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk called. And for the first time in years, Caleb Thorne felt something close to peace.